Um, hey guys, welcome to this episode of the podcast. We're talking overcoming sales challenges in 2025, and we're talking selling when the market isn't growing. And we're talking about this today because we're seeing signs of a potential recession, negative growth in Q1, signs of a stall in Q2, potentially, tightening budgets across tech, manufacturing, and services. But this conversation isn't just about economic theory, it's about how real reps and sales leaders adjust to survive and even thrive during a slowdown. And in today's podcast, I've got again my special guest, Ryan Adamson. We've been in negative growth territory in Q1. I think some data came out that we've had something close to, not quite 1%, but 0.3%. A lot of that's due to a lot of inventory surges to kind of anticipate any kind of tariff drawbacks that we're having. But the last two quarters are indicating maybe something like a recession. And Ryan, there's certain reps who may have come into the marketplace post-COVID and pre this recession. So these folks, some of these people who've been hired in the last 2 or 3 years do not know what a slow market looks like, how to sell in a slow market. There are leaders who are brand new into their role who don't know how to lead in headwinds, right? Reps feel that they're going to be working harder. Of course, layoffs are coming, right? And so your territories might be expanding, so a heavier workload. And then, of course, some results might lag because in the restricting market, you're going to have individuals who are buyers who are more skeptical. They give more scrutiny to certain projects and initiatives. And you don't want to be that leader that fails or costs the company any kind of money for a failed project. And so the core question is, how do you sell when buyers are scared to spend? And so, Ryan, you've been in this a long time. You've seen, from all from the 90s all the way here. So you've seen booms and busts come and go. And in your experience, what do leaders do? Before we get to sellers, what do the leaders do? What do the good ones do in a constricting market?
Well, that's a good question, and you're right. These aren't uncommon times, right? I mean, there are always going to be ups and downs in the market, and times when it's easier to sell than others. And when the overall market does start to shrink or contract, it definitely puts a spotlight on those people and those resources that really matter and are really important. And so for sellers and for leaders in the sales department, it requires you to be more focused than what you've been in the past, right? So sometimes you can cast your net broad and you can go out and catch orders or fish or whatever you want to call it out in pretty much anywhere at any time. And, and those are the good times when the market's up and everybody's winning. But when the market does start to slow down and things do contract or get more stagnant, then you have to be more focused on where you go, and you got to be a lot sharper on the messages that you use, because not everything's going to work everywhere like it did when everything was growing. So I think that's the most important thing that the leader does, is establishes that the fact that, hey, we as a team need to be more focused in our attack on the market that we're going after. So while in good times we can spend more time prospecting and more times building our book of business with a broader market, right now it's going to be more focused on the customers that we have and the leading prospects that are most suited for our types of solutions, so that we know that we're spending our time and energy where we're most likely going to win.
Ryan, you make a good point. You talk about being more focused, having better messaging, establishing as a team culture, a focused attack. And something I talked about yesterday on my live was, this is the time now to do a couple of things. Identify your ideal client And I mean, identify them to the T. Like you should know what wine they drink during a slow market, just because the competition's so heavy that the personalization aspect has to be kind of at the forefront. And then you talked about better messaging. So once you find them, what are you going to say to them, right? Because now you got now in a fast market, right? As you said, when you're riding the wave, there's a broader net, so that that prospect isn't being tapped on as much, right? Maybe more aggressively in a fast market, but not as much, because again, leads come a dime a dozen. So hey, if you don't give me a response, I'll just move on to the next, right? And so what's happening now is that the messaging that has to go to these people is, to these buyers, has to be personalized. You've got to do your research now. You've really got to establish authority in your space versus your competition. And so you're absolutely right. The market winners are going to be more focused, and that's just not as a leadership team, right? So now we're talking about from a seller's perspective. Now that you're, kind of going a step further, Ryan. Now that we've established that, what the team is going to do, what the leader's going to do, the leader's going to set that stage, is going to set the tone for more focused, better messaging, more focused prospecting. Now the seller has to go out there and be just as focused, right? Just as focused in your discovery, just as focused in your questions that you're asking, just as focused in the amount of time you're spending with these potential buyers. Because now, again, the market is slow. Everyone's talking to these buyers. And as the market slows, you have more time to spend with these folks. And of course, naturally, when the market slows, budgets constrict. So traveling is going to become probably a little bit less of a thing. And so if your traveling budget goes down, now you're really going to have to go back to that virtual world where you're talking more and spending more time together face to face in a virtual space. So that's a good segue into the uncertainty aspect of it. But what I want to talk about now is that, the slower decision cycles, right? Because now that we've, again, established more focus, we now know who we're talking to. Once we start talking to these folks, they're going to give us a ton of objections, right? In recession, markets, buyers fear being wrong more than they fear being missing out, right? They fear being wrong more. Right, I don't want to catch that next trend, because right now we're just trying to keep the lights on and get past this level of uncertainty. Budgets freeze. Multiple decision makers are involved in the process now. Right, you didn't need your VP of sales to get that approval. Now he needs to be involved. Right, now you have slower timelines. Things are waiting until Q3 and Q4 until there's more money and more time. So Ryan, and what have you seen in the past and now?
Yeah. Well, what I've seen and what I've learned over the years in selling in these tougher times when, things are slower from an overall market perspective, is that you do need to slow down and you need to be more focused as a seller, and you need to spend more time selling high. Because even though the market has slowed, what these businesses, they still have to operate. They still have customers to take care of, and they still have things that they have to do and get done. And so they want to be more efficient when they're doing it, when the market's slow, and they want to be more focused too on where they get the majority of their revenue and their profits. So in selling in those tough times, you really need to understand what's important to them and where they're going to realign and shift their focus of spend. Like you said, budget, which will be tighter. There won't be as much extra money to go around, but there will be money being spent. It'll just be spent and allocated to things that are more important to them in these slower times. And the only way you learn that is, like you said, by doing more homework on these companies and understanding from a executive level, C-level standpoint, what priorities have shifted and changed and how to fit into those. And that's again, when market slows and you don't have as much time to prospect and cast a wide net, you should go deeper and more focused on the accounts you have and go higher within them to understand how their priorities are being altered and changed by this slower market.
Can we talk about that for a second, Ryan? How do we go deeper and higher? Give me an example of that.
Well, it's getting to that C level, right?
Yeah.
It's understanding, at the corporate enterprise level, as they continue to move forward in this time of economic contraction,
Hmm.
how they're going to reallocate their priorities. And usually you can get to a 10K or an annual report or earnings call, but those are every 3 months. So what do you
3 months.
in the meantime, right? And sometimes it takes them a while to figure out their plan before they're ready to announce it to the market and put it in writing. So it's going to take some time for that to actually hit the street. You don't want to wait, right? So you need to use your champion and champions within the account to make those introductions, because every company needs to make money and save money, right?
Yep.
And that doesn't change when the market shrinks. It just becomes more focused, right?
Yep.
So it doesn't mean there isn't a need for your services. It just means your messaging needs to change based on what their priorities, how their priorities have changed and what their initiatives are. And the only way you learn that is by getting closer to the executives that are making those decisions, which are the C-level people within the organization.
Right. You've been at that level, at the highest levels. I don't want to use the word what worked on you, but what messaging resonated with you once you were contacted or reached out to by potential sellers, without
I
giving away too much of the sauce?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you're always looking for and listening for ways to, improve your top line, especially as a sales leader, right? So you're always looking for that. Um, and at the same time, you're always looking for ways to be more efficient with the resources you have. So if you can better deploy money that's being spent on the sales motion in a way that gets you more top line, you always want to be looking for that. When the market's growing and booming, you're only concerned about going faster. You
Yep.
don't really care about the efficiency piece. But when the market contracts, you look at where can we be more efficient with the dollars that we are spending to get more top line. But you're always still focused on top line.
When you're focused on top line, how is the positioning done? Because now that there's going to be a shift in the marketplace, now we focus more on efficiency versus speed. How does a rep or a professional position that at the C-suite level?
That's a good question. Again, it's all dependent on what the business is and what's important to that company. But at a high level, you're focused on things that are most certain in that particular industry or that business. So
Right.
wherever their biggest customers are, their biggest partners are, their biggest revenue generators and profit generators are, those are things they're going to want to continue to invest in, because they know investing now will get him more return later when the market does come back around. So again, it's better understanding your customer and their business is what's going to help you in your business, either where to spend your time or where not to spend your time. Either way,
Right.
right?
Right.
So, so I don't know that there's one magic thing that you can do outside of dig deeper and better understand how the accounts you're selling to are going to survive and position themselves to thrive when the market does turn around.
Yeah, because buyers freeze in uncertain markets.
Yep.
And what I've noticed is reps in this market tend to oversell, right? They tend to oversell on features, oversell on benefits and things of that nature, when collaboration really in a slow market becomes the hallmark of how you win business, right? You got to become friends with these folks all over again. And something that I've noticed in fast markets is you stop talking to your smaller guys, your cash flow customers. You stop talking to them because they're just in the corner doing their business, going about their business, and they're not really a big whale, but they're still there. And so these people need to be massaged and talked to, because they're profit drivers, and we don't want our competitors picking off our potential future module leaders who can become bigger whales in the future. And which brings me back to a point about sellers using more collaborative language, again, using more discovery, like Ryan says, going deeper into that account, asking deeper questions once you get to that level, understanding what the CEO's priorities are. Something that I saw before is taking that champion, right? Having them go up the ladder, go up that chain, having a champion inside the business, someone, maybe an account executive that they understand, or whoever their sponsor is that brought them into the business to you, making sure that they are bringing the message from the CEO, whatever they find on their way up, that message has to come back down so that everybody understands what's happening, what's being collaborated on, both from the CEO all the way back down to whoever sponsored you into the business, whether it be a director of sales or sales manager of some kind. And so it's very important to use better language. Like you said, better messaging comes into play as well. And, your sales skills have to improve. And because buyer resistance is going to go higher, and everyone's doing their research more, because no one wants to make a mistake.
Then I would add, the other thing that really helps in these times where the markets are tighter is building strong business case with, ROI,
Yep.
that really speaks to the return on investment and the certainty that if you spend this money, which is scarce right now, on this type of solution, you're going to get, this type of return. Because again, like I said, businesses continue to have to operate, right? And they want to be positioned well for when the market does turn to take advantage of it. So they are still going to invest. They're just going to invest more strategically in things that really are going to matter and moving forward when the market does turn back around.
That's a good point, and I want to kind of now go to, as we kind of segue to our conclusion of this episode, is now the internal pressure, because as I alluded to in the beginning, everybody takes on more, right? Because of layoffs, because of shrinking budgets, everybody has to take on more pipeline. Even though pipeline might be shrinking, now capacities, your quotas aren't, right? And so morale can tend to dip, burnout can tend to happen. And so as you're growing in your business, Ryan, in the past or even now, what have you done as a leader to prevent some of these burnout things that can happen, such as higher quotas, or quotas are high, but hey, that quota used to be shared with two of my other colleagues that are no longer here. How do you help blunt or mitigate those impacts to morale in the business?
Well, it's a challenge for everybody, right? It's not just the sellers, it's the executive teams and everybody else that has to really tighten their belts and really be more focused on things that are going to allow them to survive and position them for growth once this transition or this current situation starts to move forward in a positive way. And so the good leaders and I think the ones that are going to be most successful in capturing growth when it does come back around are ones that are able to keep their sellers, like you said, motivated and from getting burned out. And so typically organizations will do quota relief. They will do things that will really help their sellers stay engaged and stay on the team, because churn is hard, right? No one wants to have to retrain sales teams and sales people when the market does come back around, and these things are always temporary, right? They're just part of the growth cycle, and people understand that. So they don't look at it as long-term challenge. They look at it more as an opportunity to be, like I said, more focused, be better on honing our craft. And, and I think the sellers themselves need to understand and pace themselves that, hey, when the market is like this, you could be the best seller in the world and work, 120 hours a week, and it's not going to move the needle, right? Because it's bigger than you, right? And it's bigger than what you're working on. So you got to pace yourself, and you got to work strategically and take care of yourself. in those times, and you got to communicate with your leadership team on what's necessary for you to be ready to go once the market does come back around.
And if I had to piggyback off of that, and this is for some of my folks, again, like I said in earlier, those folks who are under 30 who have not sold in a market like this before, you got to develop those recession-proof skills, right? You got to develop those skills that make you better active listening skills, better discovery skills, better question and answering skills. And this is going to come through controlling the controllables, controlling your activity. What are you doing in the downtime? Are you role playing with your colleagues? Are you asking for time with your sales manager to role play to help you get better? Are you personalizing your interactions with your potential customers? What does your call quality look like? This is the time now to record your sales calls so that you can audit those calls to get better at doing your job. And then in reinvesting in your fundamentals, whether that's asking permission from your leadership to get funding for better sales training internally or externally. I offer my own private sales training, but internally there should be opportunities for you to continue to grow and develop those recession-proof skills, like Ryan says, so that you can be a champion once this market turbulence ends, which it absolutely will over time. And so, Ryan, this has been a great conversation. You know, again, uncertain times, uncertain markets, they don't just develop uncertainty, they develop champions, they create future leaders, because those of us who are in the marketplace, who are striving to be better, and slow markets actually do get better. And when the turbulence ends and the sun shines and rainbows, now, of course, it's off to the races because your skills are so much better. Ryan, you can help me close us out.
Yeah, 100% agree, Justin. I mean, that's, champions are made in those tougher times, right? It's the hardships that really make you stronger and sharpen your skills and really help you move forward in your career and what you're doing. So just take them with, this is an opportunity to learn, and this is an opportunity to get better. And when you exit out the other side, you can take advantage of that growth.
Great episode, Ryan. I appreciate you. I cannot wait to the next one. And until then, we'll see you guys next week.